Hello, welcome.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for this beautiful introduction. We're David from Severen and Kersten Geers. Of course, we're not alone. We represent our office, which I think we would like to thank at the start of this presentation too. The name of this lecture or our presentation, in which we ultimately would like to get to that model over there, is called Talk About Space. We wanted to talk about space tonight, and we thought there was no better way to start doing that while showing you this beautiful painting by Edward Shea from 1963, which is called Talk About Space, and which, in a strange way, we thought comprises or shows many of the elements or many of the ideas which, in some way, probably very indirectly, kept us busy the last years and also kept us busy for making the Kortrijk Xpo project. As you can see, it's a very particular painting. Here it's shown a bit too big. It's supposed to be a little bit smaller. That small that the pencil you see below is supposed to be real scale. That real scale pencil somehow shows an aspect of size or measure to this painting. The word space, as Rocher would have explained it himself, is somehow sizeless. It's as big as he could to put it somewhere in the top of the painting, since he said, you know, words have no size, objects have. So this whole idea of dealing with space and trying to understand the size of it, maybe, by doing specific interventions, is what somehow we think keeps us very busy.
We would like to show you some projects. To start with a series of older projects to come gradually to the model project. Some first projects who explain actually, as Kersten explained to you, that idea about space and how to deal with that in our practice. This is a project for a border crossing between the United States and Mexico. In a competition, we were asked to make, or to think about that border crossing, to make in a way a bridge over a fence which borders these two countries. In the almost first infrastructural question, we tried to deal with that in a more spatial way. Our proposal actually makes a break in the fence, creates a no man's land in between, and organizes in that no man's land actually a grid of palm trees surrounded by a large wall higher than the fence itself, and creating at both sides entrances and exits. This results actually as a comparable to oases in North Africa, in a hidden garden where crossing is done in the most pleasant way, shade of the palm trees, and you can go from Mexico to the United States, vice versa, and of course waiting, as you know all, is always happening to enter a country and not to exit it. For us it was a very important project because of the simple gesture, let's say, to frame a space which didn't exist before.
Ultimately, and that's also why we showed it as a first, you could say, and we would like to show you in a way 4 of these, let's say, ideas of elements. For us it's important because it's reducing the idea of making architecture to simply building a wall. There's a clear inside, there's a clear outside. The desert, which is as undefined as it is Mexican, meaning many different buildings, or as undefined as at the side of the United States, meaning simply nothing, has its spatial counterpoint in this very precisely defined space by the adobe wall. This idea of making a wall, and by doing so defining a certain specific spot, which, who knows, might have even a hedonistic quality, is what brought us further in making this summer house, which is here, as you can see, in Ghent. It's in a way an extension of an existing house which we baptized Winter House. It's the black thing on the top. I don't know if this arrow works. It doesn't. But basically, basically on the top of the image you see here the Winter House, the summer house below. This idea of making it a simple perimeter, a house on itself, which is more than just a wall, but which is a container for a specific kind of life, a life which is defined by how we deal with its borders, which is in fact here a rhythmic modulation of very simple steel modules on which a vine can grow. Was an attempt to investigate how, to a certain extent, making such a specific space can go further than the harsh reality of the wall of the border crossing. It can in fact also become a beautiful space in itself, where the insert of specific detail, as you can see, the detailing of the frames as such on which the vines grow, but also the detailing of the columns in between, which are here made out of stainless steel inox, in order to make them disappear, ultimately becomes the real architecture. The issue also of measure, of scale, of 3-meter high modules on 19 centimeter, which in fact are 3 times the module of these 30 by 30 concrete tiles, became very important to us. So that by bringing in a very precise, almost perfect, in a certain sense, universe within an all not so perfect context, is somehow for us the key.
Yeah, so you can see this is all designed from its inside, based on the grid of the concrete tiles, as Kersten explained. And of course, by being precise on its own, it's very different when you approach it from the outside. So this is a picture taken from its back, from the margins it's creating. And actually these margins are as important in our designs as is the perfect universe next to it. Meaning that in this case we stand in the margin of a garden space with an outside kitchen, which you don't see in the picture. But actually you see that you can approach this summer house from different ways. And as you saw also in the first picture, actually the confrontation of these two almost complementary universes, let's say the house of daily life, this house of hedonism, is actually what this design is about. And that's how we detailed it, that is how we put it on stage, let's say. So, and then in the next project, a project also in Ghent for a bridge on the back of a cultural building, the Handelsburg, which faces the Kortrijk, the big square you see on the right top side of the image. There were questions: how can we make a back entrance for logistics, but also an exit for escaping, evacuation, and at the same time also maybe a possible new phase in the back, a back entrance, a new entrance to that complex. When we were confronted with the situation, we saw immediately, in a way, a potence in the situation where the street was laying lower than the higher terrace of the building where we had to connect to. So a bridge, in a way, again an infrastructural question. We tried in a way to solve, again, by dealing how can we make something which is not just connecting A to B with a more infrastructural gesture like a lot of engineers do, but actually spanning this 25 meters in the most simple way with 10 beams in steel, and then constructing on that first structural scheme a space. This is introduced by actually our first problem which we had with the slope of the bridge. The bridge had to go up, but for us that was actually a starting point to make actually a horizontal bridge. A bridge which, making it horizontal, led us also to making a plan which is completely different. A plan in a trapezium, as you can see here, leading towards the building. And actually, by making exactly the same proportions of width and height between the beginning of the bridge and the end of the bridge, we made a perspective machine, as you can see also in the Teatro Olimpico of Palladio. These are images going very fast through actually, this shows very well the perspective. Seen from the side of the building, the space looks awkwardly short, and actually plays even with, in this case, persons who are inside the bridge, who look very short and almost tiny at the end, and very big in the beginning. From the street, of course, this changes completely, and actually looks a very long space with very small people again in the front and giants in the back. This is a view from the street where actually, as almost a counterpart of an existing bridge to the opera next door, this bridge plays with the idea of public space in the sense that it has a fence in the beginning. It can open when the building functions and it attracts then public, but when it's completely closed, it isn't a dead end on the facade at the other side of the building, but it is actually a box framed by its railing.
Yeah, so ultimately, and here it shows also that aspect of the case, whereas maybe the Mexican project we brought in to introduce the idea of the wall, the summer house to somehow bring in the element of how this perimeter stays on its own, which is particular and maybe even beautiful inside due to its detailing. Here, ultimately, this frame for us is something which almost it tries to answer the problem of the infrastructure here of the bridge by, in a way, ignoring it. In a certain sense, you can understand the bridge as a technical solution, which is this set of beams which goes from A to B, right, which makes the connection, but which we, in our architecture here, particularly accept as a very important parameter, but we don't do anything with it. And the frame as such becomes an element which becomes the bridge, so the fence or the bridge tries to turn, let's say, a typical infrastructural question into one, who knows, of architecture. So that idea, of course, of asking yourself, and of course the possibility to answer it in a proper way is existing. Like, what is architecture was probably even more apparent when we had to design or when we, after doing a competition and finally winning it, we could do a proposal for the Biennale Pavilion of 2008 for the Architecture Biennale in Venice. The idea of showing architecture was probably even the core of the project. What you see here is a kind of this U-shaped wall, is in a way our project, our new Belgium pavilion, which is somehow surrounding the at that time existing pavilion, still there of course, from 1907. And in where we, in a way, in the project we tried, maybe for the first time within the things we were doing, not so much to make a space next to an existing space, but to somehow incorporate an existing building by building something around it. And for us it was an important project, and as a matter of fact, it's let's say the moment we developed it somehow coincides with the moment we started working together with Joachim de Klerk and the Geers office on the Expo project. And it seems to deal somehow with a set of similar themes. It is to say that the building, as you see here, which is the existing Biennale Pavilion, we wanted to show in its proper architecture by not putting anything inside. So that was, let's say, one layer of the story. The second aspect was by building another piece of architecture around it, which is this enormous wall you see here, which has a certain thickness and certain rhythm and certain dimensions. We wanted people to not be able to enter the pavilion in the proper way and to use, in a certain sense, the back entrance. So again there, architecture brought in as a perimeter maybe, but even more so as an obstacle, as an obstruction. So the result was this pavilion, you could say, because we considered this the new pavilion, which, when you saw the building in its facade, you first probably didn't really quite realize what you had to do, so after a while you entered it, you walked through it, you entered through the back door, the existing building of the Belgian pavilion, you walked through the sequence of rooms to the outside, and you saw that, and of course there was another aspect to it, which was using this confetti floor to level the different spatial experiences of the sequence of spaces. And you could say within the circles of the Biennale as such, which in a certain sense always presents representations of architecture, for us it was an attempt, well, to show it in its most basic and proper way.
So in that sense we really took a lot of care about, let's say, detailing the project as a real piece of architecture, as a real pavilion, as the new pavilion for the Biennale of 2008 architecture. And this has been possible by constructing actually the whole pavilion in it is a temporary system, it is scaffolding, but by designing it and rethinking it in a very, let's say, precise way, we managed to deal with that almost very impossible issue we had in the beginning of our proposal, to make actually a new pavilion being a wall 7 meters high, 25 on 35 meters long, around the existing Belgian pavilion in the Giardini Venice.
So these four elements, I mean, which we wanted to show in these four projects, which, I mean, are some out of a series of many more, we wanted to show because we thought it somehow could work as an introduction to a set of themes which we, well, let's say, worked with, probably more unconsciously than consciously, in this project for Expo of Kortrijk. I think it's important to say, I mean, purely because, I mean, the project has been developed that way, that process-wise it's been a very strange project, because an office like ours would never have been involved in this project of that scale at that time of our existence. So thanks to Joachim de Klerk, who wrote us in the process very early because he was asked as an advisor, we could finally team up with the architects which are building most of the extensions or most of the halls of Kortrijk Xpo, the Goderis office, and we finally could make well, the project as we would like to show you tonight. At the same time, so as a sense of introduction maybe, you see here Kortrijk, you see, if you look very carefully, the egg, or het egg, which is on the left side of the ringway. Just, if I'm not now mistaken, below the egg, you have the site of Expo Kortrijk, which is again this one, and this picture is unfortunately turned. So you see, from going from the left to the right, on the top of the image you see the highway, you see a part of the egg, you see the very big complex of Expo, you see what they call in a master plan of Secchi the Galette, or one of the Galette basically, in which you have not only nowadays the Expo halls, but on the very left side you have the hospital. Between the Expo halls and the hospitals, just next to the Expo, is a very big cinema, Kinepolis, and now they're developing many more things, among which also the Channel of Commerce, to which we will come back later.
So, dealing with these huge halls for exhibitions, I mean, we were luckily involved from the beginning because it's a very complex situation, and in that sense, making a master plan for an area which has been growing from the 60s on, so more than 40 years actually. Since the beginning it had only one hall and it was located quite far from the city. but both complexes, meaning the city of Kortrijk itself and this complex on its own, Kortrijk Xpo, were growing gradually and actually getting more and more complex, meaning the Expo itself added more and more halls because of the success of the organization and the fairs they held during the years. But at the same time, the city came closer and closer and actually is expanding, and this is visible in the houses which are visible on the bottom side of the picture, but also actually the use of the whole, let's say, road, which is called the Kennedy Laan, which is an urban boulevard, added the Expo, having this, as Kersten explained, the Kinepolis and the hospital. So more and more city comes closer. At the same time, it was never really thought of a structure like this. It was actually only designed almost with backsides, docking stations for trucks, enormous parking lots, and little parks of green around it, some garbage area. I mean, gradually growing. And then at a certain point, when this organization again needed to expand, the city asked for a vision for this area. So at that point, as Kersten explained, Joachim was teamed up with Geers and asked us to join that team to think about how could, again, an expansion in this area, which is already so dense and so, say, vivid, be thought of.
So, one of the very simple ideas we had is this idea of this very awkward frame of this painting. So, what you see here is a painting of George van Tongerlo. It's in fact a black and white copy of a colorful painting. And I even have to confess it's an image we use nowadays, and we never use it when in the process. But it explains somehow very well the particularity of the issue. It is to say, when you watch this painting, you see that the frame, which is rather awkward, is extremely apparent and allows somehow this set of rectangles or square to develop, well, in whatever way the painter meant it to be. This idea that it might be possible, in a certain sense, to develop a frame around a complex, which is basically only infrastructural space, which is basically only halls which are sometimes used, sometimes not used, or even the most often of the times not used, a lot of backyards, a lot of docking stations, but at the same time a thing which needs some space to shift and to change, almost like as if it's a city in itself, which does not have a proper, well, border, inspire us to indeed think of this awkward frame. So the first idea we had, as simple as it may sound, was, is it possible to draw a rectangle bigger than the existing buildings around the buildings and say, you know what, it works in a certain sense as a city wall. Everything which is inside, well, that's a city in itself, they can do what they want. Everything which is in the outside, well, you know, that has to be mediated. That doesn't mean that there's no parking outside and, for example, on the inside. No, there's all kinds of things everywhere. The only difference is, you could say, a certain feeling of responsibility. Everything which happens inside is within the responsibility of the expo itself. Everything which happens outside the frame, all of a sudden, due to the hierarchy of this frame, which the frame somehow introduces, has another meaning, has another weight. So this idea of making a city wall, in a certain sense, you could say was also slightly inspired by the fact that the building already has, and you can see that going from the left to the right in the middle of the complex, what they call in Kortrijk the Rambla. It's a strange way, because I guess they thought, no, it's only one street, so it's probably without the S. But this idea of the Rambla, or Ramblas, as an axis to connect all the different holes, is in a certain sense already an urban metaphor. So we thought, you know, within this logic of urban metaphor, so here on the left you see this idea of the Ramblas, why not adding a Medina or a city wall to enclose the whole thing? Of course, as soon as you start to think of such a wall, the question is, how do you materialize it? You really want to build a big wall around the building in order to hide it? And this sketch, as simple as it is, for us was an important one because it made us realize that maybe it is not necessary to build a wall as high as the highest building. Again, in the parallel to the idea of a city wall, you could say, as soon as we define its borders, anything can stick out.
So, how to make that frame which we just defined? I mean, it was a very logical frame in the sense that it organized a very simple walking path around the site. Walking path connecting parkings, green zones, of course the existing and expanded expo halls, and it also replaced actually the main entrance of the whole complex to a new road, which hadn't been before. So in a sense, it had to redefine the whole complex with one gesture, let's say. So this Medina, as Kersten was explaining, this city wall, we interpreted as a new order to the site. The order you can see here in the sketch by Aladio is a rhythm in front of something else. A rhythm which is actually intrinsically embedded in the expo site itself. At the same time, we thought of that order, it could have been, again with another city metaphor, it could have been a gallery. Actually a walk path which is covered and which has a view towards one side, another view inwards another side. This was one of our first collages of it, showing actually, let's say, the complexity and the stack of boxes on the side, a linear structure defining that walking path, and being at the same time the exact border between, let's say, what we called the inside, which is a logistical space for the complex, and the outside, which from then on could be defined as green public space.
As David was saying, a very important aspect, and hence also the Rocher painting we showed at the beginning of the lecture, is this idea of measuring something. So with the facade drawing showed 2 slides ago, the idea of bringing in a certain measurement to a complex which is in fact completely measured, we thought was very interesting. Because if you see the whole set of boxes, which is ultimately what the expo is about, boxes where events can happen, one is not aware of the fact that all these boxes are in fact built on the same grid. So there's a grid of 5.70 meters within the whole complex, which is of course for pragmatic reasons used so that all buildings somehow interlock with each other, but which is immediately hidden because of typical thicknesses of building materials. Imagine you put a wall on the 570 grid line, that wall has insulation, after the insulation you do an outside cladding and so forth. In the end you have a conglomerate of buildings where no measurement is to be recognized, but which in fact, in a rather hidden way, is entirely measured. So by introducing this idea of a gallery, or this idea of a colonnade, which exactly uses this measuring system, which you see here, which is the 5.70 meters grid, you almost introduce something like a ruler. It's like you put, in a way, in the same fashion as this little pencil on the painting, you put in something of a very precise size, which all of a sudden starts to measure everything which is seen behind it. So, as David was saying, here you see the first, let's say, master plan image, where still the idea of the gallery was the key, and the background was a set of boxes to be, and that still of course is the case, to be developed without any clear rules, because it's the expo rules. So here you see this big box, this big volume with expo, could be an entrance building, could be something else. That's what the master plan suggested, as long as the front was clean. As soon as a whole team, we were involved in actually materializing it, because all of a sudden the master plan became real, we realized that, and you see the switch from black to white, we realized that by turning it into real architecture, and we will explain it a little bit later, it was more interesting, more visible also maybe, to make the ruler itself white and to make all the stuff which is infill, everything which is in the background in a certain extent, which is already darker, to make it even darker than it already is. So here you see the switch between the first master plan image and the second, let's say, the first image of the actual architectonical project, and you see the shift of color. For the rest, it's exactly the same project. It has the same idea of measurements, 570 wide, but also 570 high, because of the scale of infrastructure which is passing through, big trucks and things like that, deliveries. But ultimately, the idea, the simple measuring device, remained the same.
So actually, you could imagine it as putting a column on these exact coordinates defined by an already existing grid, painting it white, as we decided later, being that as a gesture to make actually that frame around the whole expo site. So the building site started, and what was not so clear in the plan is that actually the whole project was very big in the sense that it included leveling the whole terrain to a level which is existing inside these halls, 28.8 meters. And so actually that made the whole process also very complex. So you see in the beginning there was, let's say, the groundworks around the whole site, which in this image you can see which run down towards the halls. So this, for reasons of, let's say, possible space for tents, for use for other outside events, for parkings, for things like that, usable space has to be horizontal. So we leveled this whole space to the height of the inside of these halls. At the same time, as you can see, there was the old entrance to the complex, but this was still dating from the 60s. Well, it was made a bit later, a bit more modern, but it was actually connecting immediately on hall number 1. Hall number 1 was, in that sense, always crossed to access this whole complex. So actually that you will see later, but we moved this entrance, so demolished then the existing entrance building to the other side of the complex, to the southwest side. And this, the new site on the President Kennedy Lane, let's say. Here you see the view from the Kennedy Lane, Kennedy Land, with the same works ongoing around, leveling it, and you can see the height difference between the road around and the inside of the complex. And this is already the first picture of foundations of a building which will become the new entrance to that complex. We'll come back later to that. And here already you can see the first signs, let's say, of that gallery around the site. A gallery, very simply designed. It had to, of course, be a simple outside walking path, a concrete strip, dividing, let's say, logistical space made in asphalt, and green space, which is not yet green, but starts to be brown already in the picture.
Now what you do see is, as David was explaining, that ultimately, and we maybe did not focus too much on that, the real engine on why this whole site got developed was, of course, an issue of usable space. There was, as David sketched, on the right side of what you now see as this concrete axis, there was a slope, which was considered by the Expo people not very practical. They could not put any tents. On the left side, there was always that space, but it was not so flat, not so usable. So ultimately, it was exactly by renovating or kind of reorganizing this possibly usable areas that the project of the gallery and the project of, let's say, the perimeter of the Expo city got accepted. So in that sense, this line, as you see here, between where the truck drives and this other, well, this other truck drives, let's say, you see a very important line, the line also showed on the first plan, which is this negotiation line, you could almost say. The line between what is on the left, where Expo can do what it wants, so it puts a lot of cars if it wants, it puts everyday tents there if it wants, it puts a building there if it wants, I mean, as a manner of speaking. And on the right side, and you see already even traces of the plan of Bas Metz, who we, as a team, introduced to do the landscape design, where you see this first stairs. On the right side, you have indeed a landscape design which is hiding, you could say, even usable space too. Because on the right side, the space is also usable, but since it's outside the negotiation line, it's, let's say, the tent of the circus once or twice every year. So the idea of a place where everything can happen and a place where, because it's part of the city, something can sometimes happen, as you can see here, because in fact it is considered public space. This is in a way key to the frame of Kortrijk Xpo. So here you see again an image of, actually it looks better on this image than it looks today, the grass. Anyhow, on this image you see the grass, yet still without any gallery, of this so-called public space, park-like space, which sometimes can be used. The gallery in the making. And finally, like it looks today, and you see that the grass actually has been a little bit damaged. Somehow they used two big trucks, so they have to clean it up. And you see that here this negotiation line is exactly, yeah, that gallery, that building, or this colonnade.
So actually, as Kersten has already said, also very important for us was to deal with the outside, and here, as we said, we collaborated with Bas Metz, who made a beautiful design for actually the outside space, actually almost staging the line, which was the gallery, staging the new complex measured by this same gallery, and staging actually the complete whole complex, which is accessible from all sides through this gallery. And here you can already see actually this let's say inside-outside. In the first images, as you saw it in the master plan image, where the colonnade was still black, we thought of a certain screen, since the gallery has always two sides, let's say a more closed side and a more open side. A gallery around the square, for instance, opens towards the square. Here we introduced also a kind of a screen. In the end, not with plants on it, but actually a sort of a curtain in steel mesh, let's say, which in a way filters from the outside the inside of the complex. At the same time, you see that it opens up towards the outside, towards the city of Kortrijk, showing actually its activity, its circulation of people in it, and filters again through that second line the series of logistic activity, the docking station, the trucks driving, the parking zones, things like that. When we were asked to also design even a hall, an extra hall, a new, more, let's say, a special hall for conferences, this logic of being inside the complex, we took very serious. So the black hall you can see on the right side of the image is our design, of course together with Geers, and is positioned at a certain distance from that gallery. It shows, actually, it allows circulation around the whole complex without interrupting by special features. So the whole usability of the terrain is extremely important. Actually, very pragmatical, dealing with truck flows, things like that. This is a view you have from the gallery showing that entrances, access for parking, but also again the hall as we designed it.
So at the same time, you see, as I mentioned before, I mean, as simple as the gallery is, it's exactly by bringing in a set of, for us, very important elements that the gallery gets its specific shape. On the one hand, the gallery being this HEB white painted steel frame of 570 by 570 has this particular steel ceiling, as you see, this kind of steel folded plate in which a rhythm of TL lights is hung. Let's say that's the general framework, but within that framework, and there's a couple of other elements, you could say, which live up the gallery as such, and which we particularly like in that particular case. It is to say, one is the curtains, the steel mesh curtains, as David has just explained, which sometimes are rolled up or can be rolled up, as you see here, to make an access between what is the actual gallery and the logistical space. You see here that there's a kind of trick with little columns so that cars cannot drive in. There's also a whole indication system. You see the black panels hanging up, which have been carefully, let's say, designed in order to populate the space in a proper way. But also even there's a ticket machine for a car, parking tickets. You see there, there's a different fire extinguisher points. All these elements of different colors, which are in a way the standard color, as these objects always have, are first very important in the way they don't make the space dead. And even though here these pictures are taken on a moment where obviously Expo was not in use, because it's only in use at some times, and then the parking is full and the gallery is full of people, or at least quite some people are there. In the other moments you see that it's exactly these elements which add a certain sense of scale to, for the rest, enormous scale of the new complex. So here you see a picture on the inside of the logistical space, which is indeed immediately used as a possible parking space, but can also be a space for tents. You have a look on the new hall, which is added, which is just made black and with added relief of the profiles. And here you see, if you walk away a little bit, you see in a way a view of the whole complex from the corner, in fact, the crossroad of the Kennedylaan and the Doornikse Steenweg. And there you see the right side of the gallery have been showing you so far, which shows, let's say, the idea of the gallery as a frame to contain all these different buildings. On the right side you see our intervention of the new entrance. So the new entrance building, which is to replace the old entrance building, is for logical reasons placed on the Kennedylaan, because it's now, let's say, this new Calette, as we introduced, the more important axis of this whole area. And at the same time, of course, we were put for a bit of a dilemma, or at least we had to think like, how do you add already a building to the concept as we have just defined it? What was important in this idea, we thought, was that the entrance building, that's how we called it, is not only a set of offices, which is replacing the offices which we demolished to make the space more usable on the right, but also, since we demolished at the meantime the entrance, this weird pyramid we showed before, it's the place where you go from the gallery into the whole complex. So it felt logical that that specific building followed the same logic of measuring, let's say, of the gallery as if, and forgive us the other metaphor, let's say the city gate to this Expo city. So on the left side, you see that building.
So here you see it actually on the left side again. It follows exactly, again, the same grid. And for us, it was really important. It was an expansion of that same gallery. So how to design an extension of an outside structure which was very, very, let's say, cheaply built in HEA profiles, actually 300 by 300 millimeters, on, but making a building out of that. And for us, this is actually a rendering of that. For us, it was very important that the same structure as we used to go around the site could become a building, could become that gate to the complex, could also actually just extend the same steel deck plates which were used for the roof inside, underneath the entrance building, to become the entrance hall. For that, we designed a specific detail. A detail you can already guess we show a model of. A model which is seen here as a model of the model, because the real model is made and being not really portable anymore. It is made in real, as you can see later. But a detail which solves actually that difficulty of making a building in that outside structure. It is the same steel beams combined with other steel beams of the same dimension to almost suggest the same thicknesses, and adding modules of connecting or possible connections to a structure which would hang in that same steel structure. So here you can see what we did was make an office building 3 floors high in the 2 modules which were added to the system. 2 modules which didn't correspond with the 3 office floor heights, because of course office floors have a certain action height. It's 360 meters from floor to floor, but that allowed us to put 3 floors inside the 2 modules of our frame. At the same time, it also extended, as you can see here, the galleria to the inside of the system, to the inside of the complex, and maintaining actually the drive around for trucks. It stepped back with the entrance halls 1 step to allow their passage of trucks in front and drop-offs for VIPs. In the left side you can see already the glazed area, which is actually the same area of the gallery, but being glazed and putting the gallery to an inside condition. This is a view from, let's say, the street, the Kennedy Laan, a new perspective inside the complex. This is a first picture of an entrance hall has been almost used in the first time. Where we just positioned, let's say, back offices behind an entrance desk and used exactly the same logic as the gallery has been doing around the whole site.
What's important here for us is that this idea of bringing in this 5 m size or measurement and making this frame, as David was explaining, allowed us to make a building, or at least for us that was important, which on every corner shows, let's say, the consequence of that decision. So the entrance hall, as was just explained, is 5.70 m high. It has the same steel deck, it has the same lights. You're standing now under this office building, you see here. The office building has another logic because it's an infill, it's in black. That's by the way also why we changed the original black columns of the master plan into the white columns, because it allowed us to make very precise the white HEA and HEB profiles, because in fact the building is carried by HEB profiles which have the same dimensions, which are stronger. But the building, which has of course a lot of possible details, screens, windows and so forth, which maybe you cannot completely organize yourself, is black, because black allows you to hide a lot. It's always somehow a shadow. So that idea that this frame becomes, let's say, the fundamental thing to read, was for us more important than whether that frame as such is built all out of the same profiles. So that's also why here you see that model, let's say, and that's also the model, in a way, model on its left side, so to our side, shows this U profile, which in fact you see here on the ceiling. So what looks, when you walk in, as a complete framework made all out of the same profiles, from the outside to the inside, in fact, is in a way, you say, a falsification of a grid. And it's exactly that aspect, and you see above the U profile here of the model at show, you see this flat steel sticking out. Now that flat steel sticking out is what you see if you look carefully on the left side or on the right side. On the left side to see it a bit better of the building is these flat black pieces which are in fact carrying the floor. So again there, the idea of clashing the frame or the measuring system with that what it contains is what interested us. I mean, in order to even show the measuring system clearer in its most simple way. So here you see that, and I mean, in fact, the last 4 images, as you saw, are pictures of past princeton, who takes always much nicer pictures of our work than the ones we take ourselves, which were the ones you saw before. Here you see indeed that, and he of course was looking for certain strange parallel lines between the gallery and the building, and you see that sometimes they run through, and with reflection in the water, it's even more the case. But on this picture you see very much, let's say, the transparency, which is of course not transparency, because glass never is transparent, but let's say the suggested transparency of the box below, which belongs completely to the logic of the gallery, and which we in a way designed in a far more kind of sophisticated way, in which we put the door frames in this galvanized steel, so you see them more, and the glass becomes somehow material. And on top, the almost old-fashioned design of the facade of the office building, which is made with a lot of frames, a lot of profiles, and a lot of openable parts.
This, just one back, because also important maybe to say is that the idea of this office building is very important to the whole complex. Actually, the whole organization is located in that building, but also the whole organization which travels with the exposition showing is actually also housed in that same office building. So the offices of these temporary exhibitions locate themselves on the first floor. Second and third floors are standard offices of which are being used daily by the organization holding the complex. And then of course the entrance hall below, which has the height as the height of the gallery, so 570, is used by both of them. And this is again a picture, a night view, let's say, where the lights are put on, which shows again this idea of a gallery opening up to the city and showing fragments of another city, this Kortrijk Xpo complex with its own logics.
So, to finish, we want to show 3 projects which in a way think further on that idea, and at least are projects which now, after finishing Expo, or parallel with that, we've been developing, roughly trying to deal with similar or certain elements of what we have been explaining. So one was a competition, an invited competition for a concrete factory reorganization, you could say. You see here in the midst, you see a set of buildings which are supposed to be the concrete factory. I mean, there's a whole set of holes, and it takes too long time. And on the left, the whole process starts, and on the right of the image, let's say the concrete paneling system come out. He asked us to think of a new office building, and maybe at the meantime make a master plan of the whole site. We in a way were very ambitious about it, so we thought, okay, we should certainly make a new master plan and also make an office building. Well, here this is the context, it's in Alter, but I think it's not too important, maybe apart from the fact that we thought that the edges of the site were very nice because it very often is looking potentially to the landscape, whereas the center of the complex just has these holes, and these edges were currently not very much used, as you can see here in this image. It's somewhere this triangle there next to the canal. The idea here was, or the question we asked ourselves after Expo, is it possible to make a frame without actually making the frame properly? So in other words, is it necessary really to make the rectangle completely in order to reorganize such a, in a way, quite similar site? What we came with was a project which has these three, well, it in fact has on the left side two triangles, and on the right side is kind of a different shape, but which altogether kind of implicitly make the rectangle you see suggested here in the dotted lines. The idea was then to bring in certain different parts of the process which had to be redesigned in each of these triangles. So on the right side, always in a way auxiliary programs to the actual process of making these concrete panels. On the right side of the image you see the storage of the rough material to make concrete. On the lower left side you see in a way you could say an entrance building which can organize the off and on driving of the trucks to get the concrete plates which come out. On top of it you see this kind of very long linear element is a big crane which actually loads and unloads the trucks, which was already there. And on the top side, the actual question of the competition is the office building, which we did not design as a high building somewhere located on the complex, but as a very low one-floor high building in the same way as, in fact, all the other two corners. So all three corners are only 1 floor high, made out of concrete panels, of course, or prefabricated panels. And it's rather thought of almost like a villa-like office building. So here you see the storage of the granulates, one corner. The second corner you see on the left side already, far away with the flags. You see the actual, I call it entrance building, which coordinates the loading and unloading of the trucks. And in the very back side again you see the last building, which is this building, which is a triangle, which is an almost villa-like office. We unfortunately didn't win the competition. We thought it was far too villa-like. But nevertheless, we thought we wanted to show it exactly because for us it was an important step again. Like how can you deal with the scene without having to really formalize the actual frame?
And like in the project of the summer house, as we explained it looks for, in a way, new margins where architecture before wasn't really performing yet, and let's say backsides, which we have a lot of them in Belgium, are suddenly becoming interesting corners, and in this case, really the cornerstones of the project, literally. Another project, which we are currently building actually, is a project for a computer business in Tielt. It is located on a very awkwardly shaped plot. The client, she came to us asking to make a design for her computer business, and confronted us with the plot she bought in Tielt. It's situated on the Adolf Loosstraat and Loosveldstraat. Very difficult to confuse, but it's Adolf Loosveldstraat. And there you had the site, what originally was actually resulting out of backyards of older parcellations, but again became suddenly a front towards actually a very important axis in Tielt, which houses also a bigger school complex, which is for her very interesting, of course. Here you see the site from the air. Yes, it's in the middle here, on that side. Still being built with some little constructions which we demolished to make it free, actually. But what interested us was actually the very, let's say, awkward shape of the site, and then, let's say, how to make a possible design for a computer store there. We introduced actually a very simple, pragmatic way of making a project there by positioning two identical buildings on that very awkward shaped site. Two identical buildings which overlook an inner courtyard and which are framed in the first place by the awkward shape of the site itself. This was a very pragmatical approach because actually it allowed us to build two buildings. By being identical, they could be fairly cheap, which was of course asked. And at the same time it made these margins, which we're looking after, just on its own, by this position, let's say. So you can see here, this is the plan of the ground floor, where you see in between the two rectangular buildings, you see the inner courtyard. Then there's a front zone which has been liberated by pushing the building back from the street side, which is inclinated. And in the back we could build also. It's important to mention because there were old zoning laws allowing us to build an atelier up there, and we actually managed to really tell our client that she needed two buildings for her. First of all, she thought to get, of course, one building, but then since her business really works with a retail store, let's say a shop, and a business-to-business service, and she also still wanted an apartment, for us this was the ideal opportunity to make these two buildings and to define in the first building the shop, and in the other end of the square the business-to-business. And then on the second level to have the apartment close to the street and the second level of offices of the business-to-business service. This is an image. Important in this project was also actually the site. It was being bordered along the whole line of the street by a long wall which hid gardens behind it and the garage boxes, things like that. At the other side you have the schools, but to make almost a first entrance to that site, I used this idea of the brick wall to make a first, let's say, border or limit or frame of our own universe. Yes. This image shows the step, let's say, in there.
Okay. Yeah. So for us, I mean, whereas we often try to make a very precise border, maybe to deal with the not so precise inside. Here we thought that by making this very, let's say, rigid composition of two similar or the same volumes mirrored towards each other was an attempt to somehow relate to the irregularity of the site, as I was explaining. The result is, of course, that while, let's say, emphasizing the irregularity of the site, we rebuilt the walls, which were in fact surrounding us. Why did we do that? Because, and we showed very quickly in the beginning, this wall of, in a way, its neighbors, where there's either a garden or a set of garage boxes. It's exactly the appearance of the walls which somehow make that site specific. It's a site, you could say, waiting for development which might never happen. But at the same time, it's a site where, let's say, the brickness of its surrounding is extremely apparent. So by emphasizing these brick walls, building them high there where we could, in fact there where also the buildings are, almost as if they're a second skin. I mean, if you watch it on the plan here, opening up, you could say, and protecting the facades of the existing buildings. We could make this extremely pragmatic, extremely basic buildings, which have an almost non-architectonical detailing, only an emphasis on its curtain facade, exactly because these gentle and light buildings are protected by this almost monstrous wall. The story of the front is in a way very pragmatic as well. We were convinced that the whole site had to be surrounded by a wall, but we were of course also convinced that the entrance, the main facade where the shop is entered, should be open. So in order to make it possible to make a brick wall, like we also do on the back side of where the other building is, also to the front, but keeping the facade completely open, we simply looked for, we did that together with the team, and we looked for a structural solution. The structural solution was this big beam, of which we thought that exposing it in its most blunt and direct way on the outside, because like with many projects in a certain sense, the inside was for us extremely important, gave it its particular graphic.
From the inside you can see actually we were allowed to build in two zones to a two-story high level, which is the front zone on the street, of course, and the zone in the back. And in between there, we just were allowed to build a normal height garden wall, which is 2.5 meters in this case, and a 7 meter high wall, which is the same height as the building surrounding on this two extremes of the side. Here you can see the triangle opening towards the street, and actually the building almost touching even this surrounding walls. There you could have, let's say, a garden entrance, which again immediately enters the margins of the project, which you can see here. And from the other side you would be able to enter to the main square of the two buildings, let's say, through a garage entrance for which allows cars to park also in the middle of the project.
As a last project for tonight, we wanted to show the project of the Chamber of Commerce, which we, again, through an act of pure chance, are developing with the Kortrijk's office, which was a result of a competition we won last year. And in fact, only less than a year ago, or about a year ago now, and which is located exactly where Kortrijk Xpo is located, which is a very strange accident. On the left side, you hopefully still remember Kortrijk Xpo, the whole Expo complex. Sorry, on the right side for you, I apologize. On the left side, you see the hospital of Kortrijk in the making, and if you follow the road back to Kortrijk Xpo, you see the first cross exactly on the right corner of that cross is where the VOCA, or the Chamber of Commerce of West Flanders, is located. Our idea of making a project for the Chamber of Commerce had a lot to do with the context as we have been describing before, which is that it's a context which, in a certain sense, is quite suburban. It's to say it's not very urban because it has a lot of big infrastructural gestures and buildings. At the same time, with the coming of the hospital, with the development of its surroundings, there's a weird ambiguity. Buildings still approach this Kennedy line, this big lane we've been talking often before about. At the same time, you need to somehow develop within that idea of a posture of facade. We believe a project which does not simply make a building with a car park in front, end of question. So we thought that, again here, after making the frame around Kortrijk Xpo, it was necessary again to think of what would be the face of a building, in this case the Chamber of Commerce, on that street. We took that extremely literal in this particular case. It's to say, you could argue that we made a building which is only a facade. So what you see here, this L shape, is the new Chamber of Commerce. It's in a way a very thin building, which is bent in such a way that it appears much bigger. It appears like a big block. Do you see that? How does it do that? It does that because it can use the height difference there, which is on the front it has this proper facade on the back, where the landscape allows you to enter a bit higher. In fact, that's already immediately the first floor, and you enter on top of what is hidden below. What's hidden below is, let's say, the complexity of the program. The building, which appears as a single office building, in fact is an office building with a whole set of meeting rooms and a quite elaborate program with auxiliary spaces, which you see here, which fills or completes the square and makes the building, at least in its base, what it, at the outside, on the street side, suggests to be. So these are the two collages, two perspectives, which we made for the competition. So we argued we would like to make a building which looks as a proper building without any door. It looks almost like a showroom, you could say. A very simple box to the Kennedy line, which is here, where we called it Villa Boca, where so another villa, as you see, where it was more successful in the sense that we said, okay, the stairs to go from one floor to the other are a very important feature, and the building is almost transparent, and you see the people working. Whereas if you actually drive to the parking, which is part of the landscape design, again done together with Basmet, you realize that you enter a completely different building, and almost like in a Western facade, the building is much more narrow than you have ever imagined. You walk over the set of meeting rooms, which you see here below, the square which takes a set of these trees, which are part of the landscape design, and makes them specific, and you enter the complex.
So actually, this was really important for us to design this building almost as a Janus had, having two faces. One face, like a villa does, to the street, and one to the garden. And since the garden was a very important element in our design, the street facade we considered almost as the billboard of the building. It shows actually a big concrete cupboard showing fully its interior behind glazed facades. And here you can see also the slope in the terrain just bluntly being held with the glass, so just positioned on the grass almost. This was possible because of a very, let's say, good coincidence that the north, actually the plan of our building, let's say the L shape of the office wings you see here, was facing exactly north. And so we could completely make that facade out of glass, while the other side, as you saw in on the collage we made, was of course the opposite side, is the south side of the building. And there we had to protect the building from sun. At the same time we had to organize the entrance. As we explained, for us it's very important that this entrance didn't fit just in the front facade, because that's its billboard. But in the back facade we also had to make a square for entering that building, and of course the parking organized in the garden. That square and that facade actually together make a sunscreen and a square at the same time. It is made out of steel grids, which are hung for sun protection in front of the glass of the building, and at the same time can function as, let's say, the tiles on the top floor of the roof part of the patio level below. So in a way it made an abstract frame in that garden of some trees which stick out from the patio, which you can find later back in a meadow, an opening in the green that the building is looking at from its garden side. This is the building in construction. And now we walk around, let's say, seeing the side facades which are not yet finished. And then this patio, where you can already feel the inside corner defined by this L shape of the building, almost defining the X, Y, and Z axes of that space, which we find very important of the building, which is actually an outside space.
So, an element which you saw in the collages and started to play gradually even a bigger role in the project, are these stairs. So here you see that the stairs shown in the collages as very apparent objects which, let's say, give the building a villa-like character, we said, but at the same time give it a certain specificity, almost like, you know, is it the confetti in the Biennale or the plants in the summer house, a certain kind of playfulness which all of a sudden makes this building specific. We finally decided to develop the stairs in a project which, as David described, is almost built as a parking garage. The basic prefabricated columns and beams which have almost inexistent detail. Everything which you see here as a rough construction is in fact not fully finished, so there's no other detail to be found apart from the facade, which is relatively sophisticated, and these stairs. The stairs are made finally out of concrete. They even carry the part of the building there where they cut it, and become, let's say, as you could say, sculptural objects or as cut-throughs. And you see it also here on this image. You see on the left, you see the spiral stair, which is in fact 3 pieces, which curves gradually through the building. And you see the long stair on the right side, which is also 3 pieces, but which are put one after the other with diminishing measurements. They become, in a way, the protagonists of the building.
On the inside, as we explained, the outside is in a vital importance, making a frame towards the garden. Here you see the stairs again, and this is actually, again, one of these buildings built with extremely low budget. So being pragmatic was our only possibility, and these stairs were, let's say, needed for circulation, of course, but just by making them, taking them out of typical cores where stairs are organized and making them into the architectural elements, we succeeded to make a very simple building, well, we think, something which could be interesting. Thank you.